Is it fair that Americans pay taxes? I mean, honest truth now. Let's just discuss it. Not everybody that probably watches me, 95% of people would say no. I would hope that 100% would say that we should pay taxes. But should we pay taxes? If we have a government who prints money, who believes in this modern monetary theory that money is not really based on anything but the trust of the government, why do we pay taxes? Now, sadly, there's people on one side of the aisle that believes that Americans should pay taxes and even more taxes, and they want to give it away to other people. Think about that now. If a government can print money, make trillion-dollar coins to borrow more money, why is it fair that Americans pay taxes? They lose 30, 40, 50% of their wages to ultimately give it to a government who is frivolous with it, that causes inflation. You don't believe that. We're going to talk about economists and what he said, and also what Donald Trump said about taxes, because both these things are eye-opening, and I think we're getting to a point. I think we're getting to a point, a breaking point in our nation to where we cannot financially afford our own debts, and our government keeps spending. So what does that mean for our money? And I love the fact that some people are questioning, why are we even paying taxes, and is there any reason for it anymore? Let's talk about that today. Hey guys, welcome to The Max. Thank you so very much for being here today. If you are new to our channel, please go down here, press subscribe. That way you can keep up with what goes on day to day. Sometimes it's prepping, sometimes it's current events, sometimes it's just what I feel for the day and the opinions of how crazy the world we live in. Our goal is to build a common sense approach to the world we live in and try to gain wisdom for sure. Now, if you like the content, give us a thumbs up. We humbly ask you to do that because it means the world to us and helps us spread our message across this platform. Now, today we're going to be talking about taxes, money, the point of why do we pay taxes if our government prints money? And then if they print money, are they the cause of the inflation, not the corporate greed? So let's first talk about the Kamala policies, then we're going to talk about the Trump policies, then we're going to hear from someone who was an economist for a long time here in America that makes great sense. Actually, let's start off with that comment that Milton Friedman said just a few years back. He says, consumers don't produce inflation. Producers don't produce inflation. Inflation is produced only by too much government spending and too much government creation of money and nothing else. Now, when we give stimulus or we give free money out from the government, that puts a falsity of the economy. Basically, that's putting money into an economy that we don't need. That means there's too much money not buying goods, so therefore inflation comes and sets in. Well, that's where we're at. So you wonder why things like groceries cost more, and they're at an all-time high under Biden-Harris. When people get money, what do? If you're bad with money and then they give you more money, what actually happens? You spend it, you blow it. What happens to that money? The richer get richer because you're spending the money and still learning how to save it and learning how to be good stewards with it. And then the poor get poor because you've already spent the money that you probably didn't need to spend. The money that's in the systems now is not money that's just been circulating for a long time, and also the economy of people paying in taxes. Most of it's new money that they've printed. Well, that new money printing is cause for inflation. Inflation causes for people to spend money they don't have to then turn around and let it float up to the richest of the rich, and then the poor can't afford groceries. The poor can't afford anything else. So therefore, it's another revolving circle where the government comes out and wants to give you more money. That's where we're at. You don't believe me? Kamala just came out with a few policies that we talked about the last few days. Basically, it's socialism, where she wants to give you tax credits for buying homes, tax credits for having children, which is unbelievable to me because the Democrats have pushed, this is where she's trying to grab that independent vote, because the Democrats are now, for the DNC, Planned Parenthood is having a bus there to do abortions and vasectomies for free for anybody attending the DNC. So I don't know if they're really worried about those child credits. But anyways, I digress. So she's wanting to give free money to people who cannot afford to buy a home, What does that mean? That means they're going to be more of a slave to the lender because they can't afford the down payment. They sure can't pay the monthly notes and to pay for this home without paying monster loads of inflation, monster loads of interest, and pretty much never actually get on top of their debts, most likely. If you can't afford your down payment, you should not be buying a home. But let's keep on going. Then she comes out and says, we're going to stop corporate greed and we're going to make sure that you can afford your own groceries again. Now, let's go back to the Milton Friedman comment just then. The point of inflation, the point of things going up, is not because the consumers or producers are just being greedy. It's because the government has printed too much money. The government makes the problem, but then they want to be the solution. But they want to act like the problem wasn't their problem in the first place. They're just the solution to it. Now think about that. Go back to inflation. We hear inflation is made because government prints too much money and spends too much money. So they made the problem, and now they're wanting to be the solution. What's the solution? To give more money to people to buy homes that they can't afford, and to ultimately get to the private sector and put an extra tax or penalty on them and overregulate them to not charge any more than they're charging, which will ultimately shut down smaller businesses because they can't afford to cover their cost if the government is telling private sector that you cannot charge this for those items. Even though the government caused the problem, they're wanting to basically make a solution to it, which is going to ultimately hurt. Because like we talked about before, government's problems are really because they made it, and then the solutions end up being a bigger problem because government never really puts their hands in anything and dabbles in anything and actually becomes a good thing. Mostly becomes a bad thing. So that's one side of the aisle. So we hear all these tax credits, we hear all this frivolous spending. Both sides do it. I'm not making light of that. I think that your problem with Congress and the reason they keep spending money, if you took lobbyists out and took side hustles and the fact of how they can beat the system, honestly, most of these congressmen would probably go home because they realize it's not worth it. So term limits and lobbying, taking lobbying out of Congress, I believe would solve most of these issues. But that's not what we're talking about today. That would solve it though. But you have one side that is literally still wanting to spend more money that we don't have. That's wanting to give money to Ukraine that we don't have. That's wanting to print more money because they want to say that the solution is actually giving more money into the economy, which is not. Now, let's listen to a quote that Trump just said. A tariff is a tax on a foreign country. A lot of people like to say it's a tax on us. It's not. It's a tax on the other countries, and we're not going to feel it. Now, here's where he's coming from. He made a comment that he would love to cut a lot of our taxes, basically income tax, and use those monies that we're losing based on income tax and start charging more tariffs across the world. The benefits, let's talk about the pros there. First of all, that would encourage more people to have their own money. So say you bring in $1,000 a paycheck, instead of bringing in $600 or $700, you now bring in $1,000. Makes sense, huh? It's your money. You know, we started this country on a 1% tax on tea. Now we're getting taxed 30 to 40% from our own government. But again, I digress. And you're made to pay Medicare and Social Security, and you can't opt out. Now, Trump says he wants you to keep a lot of your money. So that's what happens. You have more money, then you have more money to spend. What's that encourage? Well, it encourages you buying local and American business-made items. Because guess what? If we're putting tariffs on higher goods coming across the world, coming here, now your Democrats would say, oh, that hurts bringing in goods and it's going to cost more for Americans. No, what it does is it encourages Americans to buy American, and the things that's coming in, it puts them on a level playing field, so your Chinese goods and your Indian goods are not any economical or any cheaper. They're the same price as American goods, so therefore most people would buy American, by the way. Does that hurt the global impact? No, because we're still exporting our goods. And America is still strong enough to where our goods mean something. The things that we're importing, are they things that we really need? It goes back to medicines. It goes back to food that is being shipped over here. It goes back to junk toys and plastics. Are those things that we actually need for American to be sustainable? No. We say we want to be part of a global movement, but actually what we're doing is we're taxing our individuals and letting countries come in here and sell cheap goods to us. So what Donald Trump is saying is, I want to cut the taxes and I want to put higher tariffs and higher tax basically on other countries. Why would any American be against that? Well, several billionaires and several Democratic economists are saying, oh, that's a terrible policy. We cannot not tax Americans. Now let's go back to the fact of what we talked about earlier. You're taxed to give your money to the government because you've been successful, for them to turn around and give to someone else. Well, why are we paying that tax if the government is still printing money? It's a control element, correct? So you make, let's say, $50,000 a year, you're only bringing home $38,000, $37,000, $36,000 a year. Then, because the government is spending more money than they need to, and they're printing more money, that means inflation's higher. So not only are you taxed, you actually have inflation to deal with, which is basically what? A double tax. So now let's start back over. And again, I'm not trying to confuse you here. What our government is doing is not just taxing us. They're double taxing us, because not only are they taxing us, of course, for all the things that we have to pay, they're actually causing more of a tax without saying it's a tax. They're causing inflation. If inflation costs you 20 or 30% more on groceries, so therefore you've paid 30 or 40% in taxes, and then you're losing another 20 or 30 or 40% in basically having to buy goods for more, is that fair for Americans? Well, that's exactly what one side of the aisle wants to keep on doing. Now, I do not make a pass for Republicans who spend too much money. There's a lot of Republicans that still want to give more money and spend more money because lobbyists and pork is telling them to. But what Trump is saying is, I'm here and I want to cause more problems for other countries to bring in goods. I want American jobs to thrive, and I want Americans not to have to pay so much tax. And we'll make sure that we make our income and our revenue up by the money that's coming in from overseas. Again, Democrats are saying that's not going to work. It's not enough tax basis. This is the same party that's telling you they're going to keep on printing money, and that's going to cause more inflation. But they want to blame that on Trump, not on themselves. It's a double standard. They can't have their cake and eat it too. What they're wanting to do is tax you and keep on printing money to then ultimately double tax you with inflation, which inflation means you're going to spend more money for goods, which will mean for them to give you more money because that is stimulus and they need to make sure that they're keeping the economy going, so therefore they're adding more debt to you. That money is now getting paid to the same big companies, and the rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer, and you're the one getting taxed and double taxed. And the simple solution is easy. We simply cut our tax, we charge more for goods coming in, tariffs, and we quit spending money we don't have. It's simple. It's elementary economics. What happens in your own home? If you make $1,000 a month or $1,000 a week, it doesn't matter of the money you make, it's the money you spend. If I make $1,000 a month and only spend $500, that means I have $500 left. If I make $2,000 in a week but spend $4,000 a week, I make more money, but then I spend more money. The person who made less money and saved more money actually come out ahead. That's what our government's doing. We're the biggest country and make the most money in the world. However, we can't learn to balance our budget because we are too wrapped up in spending money that we don't have. If we just simply think about how a balanced budget would help Americans, how getting rid of lobbyists in our Congress would help Americans, how not taxing our people and taxing goods from other countries would help our people. It would start American jobs back, manufacturing back, and also give more money into the pockets of Main Street Americans. This is very easy economics. Wouldn't it be nice if you could keep your whole paycheck, or at least 90% of your whole paycheck? Go to a flat tax only and only tax for stuff that really matters. If we saw a balanced budget and our government was not frivolous with spending, I believe most Americans would say, I'm willing to pay for good roads. I'm willing to pay for public transportation. I'm willing to pay for, of course, law enforcement and things like that, because then we see our dollars working. We see infrastructure bills actually being infrastructure bills. We see the fact of spending money wisely. But instead, we fund wars we don't need to be in, And we keep taxing our people and ultimately saying that we're going to now be able to solution by giving more credits and more tax incentives to people, which means instead of going to get tariffs like Trump is saying, instead of getting that money and giving tax credits to people to buy homes and all that good stuff from tariffs, they want to get it from other Americans. It is a true Robin Hood mentality. Almost, oh, that sounds too good. It's actually a Ponzi scheme. Take from one set of Americans and give to the other. That's what equitable means. That's what socialism is. So we have an inflation causing problem. We have a money problem in America where our economy is costing an all-time high. Vehicles, livestock, homes, groceries, look at it, are at an all-time high. Kamala's answer is, let's spend more money, let's give more tax dollars away to people who need it. Well, what they're doing is actually taking from successful Americans and giving to poorer Americans while printing more money to give overseas. Trump's plan? Cut the taxes, put more money in people's pockets automatically because you're cutting the taxes and you're making that up by charging more to China, India, and any other country that imports goods. How would anybody in America be against that? Most Americans are not. You know who's against it? The Democrats, the billionaires, the people who don't like Trump. But ultimately, it's a good plan. I love when people dog out Trump or dog out Musk and talk about how bad their economics are. Two self-made billionaires who didn't need politics to make them rich. At the same time, everybody that's a politician has made their wealth by being a politician. Biden is not smart in economics. Biden has made money off of you and me. Politicians are making money off of you and me. They're not making money by being good businessmen. They're doing it because they're ripping us off. So when we want to listen to economic policy, I'd probably want to listen to people who actually have made money in the private sector, who's paid taxes, who understands how risky it is to make money, how hard it is to run business. Not from politicians who ultimately get paid to sit in Washington to do insider trading, to do Ponzi schemes, and to tax us and overregulate the American people more. Back to Milton Friedman. Consumers don't produce inflation. Producers don't produce inflation. Inflation is produced only because of government spending and the government creating money. There's nothing else. It's government's fault. So government wants to raise your taxes, make you pay taxes, and then basically print more money to inflate the economy to ultimately cost you more. Do you believe that's going to work for the American people? It's amazing we started this country because of a 1% tea tax. And now most Americans are paying 30 to 45% tax, some 50% tax. And then on top of that, paying another 20 or 30% of inflation tax that the government calls because they've been too frivolous with our money and giving money away. And printing more money that we shouldn't be printing. Now it's time to get on good fiscal policies. And Trump saying he's going to cut our taxes and charge more to all these countries importing all this cheap goods, I think is a game-winning deal. Guys, let me know your thoughts. God bless.